the picture looks better than the previous one.
Exactly. Okay.
So there's like, I literally have it on my stand.
That's a really great roadmap for penetration testing.
Just learning his methodology is like what got me to where I am in terms of like the pen testing field.
Rana Khalil is working as a senior security specialist. I'm pleased to have her here to share with us her experience in information security field. I will give you 2 words or 3, and then you have to choose one. Offense or defense?
Offense.
Okay. Burp or zap?
Oh, burp, for sure. No, no shade on like zap, but burp is better.
I will come later to that point.
Okay.
But yeah, Linux, Windows, or Mac?
Oh, I want to say Mac, but Linux.
Okay.
Windows is like a complete no-no for me.
Okay. So bug bounty, full-time or part-time?
Full-time. Oh, sorry, like bug bounty doing it full-time?
Yeah.
Oh, no bug bounty at all.
No bug bounty,
Yeah.
okay.
Or part-time if you have the time. Yeah.
All right. Working remotely or on-site?
On-site.
Black box or white box?
White box.
Black or white?
White.
White. Okay. So
yeah, white box, because you
yeah.
have more access to information. You don't have to necessarily do it like the methodology from like a white box perspective, but in case you do like come across something from like a black box perspective and you don't understand how it works, at least you have the backend code to confirm that your hypothesis is correct. Oh, you didn't hear it. Okay,
I just didn't hear
you
it.
wanted clarification.
No.
Sorry.
But yeah, white box testing is also a fun thing. I usually ask the developers to provide me with specific areas of the code that I feel that requires more attention, and so I can read it and then I can have an idea of if there's any vulnerability there. But
I hate white box pen testing, but if I were given a choice, I would always ask for the code. I would always do it from a black box perspective. I would only refer to white box when I'm stuck. And I know something's vulnerable, but I can't exploit it. That's the only time I would refer back to the code.
Yeah, same thing here. So just to go back to Zap, I feel like it's not a good idea to get tied to one tool or another, because just to give you an example, lately I had a penetration test of an open API, and so there is no front end. You have to basically go through the endpoints, and it's tedious to just copy everything by hand and put it in Burp or Zap. So I tried some plugins or extensions that were in Burp. Sadly, they didn't work. For some reason, the Java library crashed. And so I tried and didn't work. And so I just fired up Zap proxy, and it worked like a charm. Just import the file, and then you have all the endpoints captured there. So it saved me a lot of time. Yeah. But
Zap, like I do, like I started off with Zap, right? I do believe it's useful. It's just that somewhere along the lines, I switched to Burp, and it just became, especially the professional version of Burp, it just became so much easier to use.
Sure.
Than Zap itself. But I agree, like when something doesn't work, that's a really good idea. I wouldn't have thought of that. I would have maybe used Postman or I don't know, something else to try and figure out how to get it to in Burp working. But yeah, that's a good point. I'll keep that in mind for anything that does not work in Burp.
But yeah, Zap Proxy is also a great tool. It also integrates in pipelines. Like I worked with it using in CI/CD pipelines. It was a great tool, and it's free on top of that. Yes. So I really thank Simons, who the main maintainer of Zap Proxy. He's really doing a great job. as well as the community.
Oh, absolutely. Great. A big shout out to like everyone in the OWASP chapters worldwide. Like the things you guys create, the things you guys provide is amazing. And like I said, I didn't have like the Web Security Academy or like, I wasn't familiar with platforms like Hack the Box and so on. So like majority of my learning was through like installing OWASP projects and learning how to do it, through those projects. And I like, they were a huge contributor of my learning back then. And they still are in some ways. Like there's still tools that I use, like dependency check and so on. And so big shout out to OWASP.
Yeah, sure. So I'm just going to start right away with what is your current position? What do you do on a day-to-day basis? What are your responsibilities?
So my official title is Senior IT Security Assessment Analyst. I'm responsible for pen testing the applications or the technologies that my organization uses or that my organization produces. So really a typical day-to-day in my job is, deciding on which technologies need to be pen tested, coming up with a rules of engagement document on, how the pen test is going to go, who needs to sign off on the pen test, meeting with the business and IT owners to get that sign off, to perform that pen test, and then performing the actual pen test. And once that's done, it's a matter of debriefing the affected parties on how the pen tests went, the vulnerabilities that we found, and then how to remediate those vulnerabilities. So then we work with the affected teams to try and remediate the vulnerabilities that we found. So that's like in a nutshell what a day-to-day work for me is. Of course, this doesn't all happen in one day. For depending on the scope of the engagement, it could be maybe a couple of days. It could go up to maybe a couple of weeks. So that's what I do.
Great. That resembles a lot what I've been doing in my previous job as a penetration tester. So I have this question: is it like early in the development lifecycle, or towards the end where we have the organization has already developed the product and ready to be shipped?
So ideally, you want it to be throughout the software development lifecycle, but sometimes it does happen where, security was not involved at the beginning. And so you come in at the end. Of course, that means that the time it requires to fix the bugs that we find is much more. It's also much more expensive, and it causes just a headache to pretty much everyone involved. And we look like the bad guys because we're coming, maybe a few weeks before the go or no-go live date. And, we're stopping it because, guess what? Your application is vulnerable, just like any other application, we test. And so ideally you want it to be in, throughout the software development lifecycle, and not just pen testing in general, security assessments, education in terms of security to the developers and so on. But it does happen in edge cases where, you do get involved only at the end. And so you have to pretty much deal with it and learn from that for the future.
Yeah, right. It's a mindset that the organization should have, and it's already a good thing that they've hired you to do the job. I recall when I barely started, there was no security pen tests or assessments for that matter, and then gradually the culture started to get introduced into each and every project. And then we had projects coming in and day out. So from your end, my question would be, what is your best finding, if you will, without being too specific if you don't want to?
When I'm asked what my favorite bug is, it's really the logic flaws, because those are the interesting ones. All the other ones, you could either follow a step-by-step approach and then get to that, or just use an automated scanners for like the really simple type of bugs. But whenever I'm asked my favorite, type of bug, it's always, the ones that exploit the business logic of the technology that you're using or the application that you're using. And that's what keeps it interesting for me when it comes to pen testing solutions. And that's really, because with every application, or you could say with every technology, if you're not testing applications, with every technology, it's always different. The people that developed it are different. And so trying to get into the mindset of how the developers developed a certain solution and what the intended legitimate path of using that software was, and then trying to go around that, I think is the most interesting, type of bugs that you can find. And they're usually the most damaging bugs as well.
That's very interesting. Logic bugs are really the hardest to find, and they also require, I guess, two things. The first thing is maybe a development background, and the second part is to really take your time to understand the logic behind this application. And this, I guess, from your experience as well, you can maybe confirm it doesn't happen the first day of your engagement.
No, this is why when people give you 2 or 3 days to pen test an entire application, it's like, okay, I can run an automated scanner on it if you're just giving me 2 days, right?
Right.
But you have to give me at least 10 days, because our job is, if you really think about it, it's a little bit more involved than, some other jobs, not all jobs, but other jobs, because, with every application that you test, you have to learn the application inside out on how to use it, and then from there, how to break it. So it takes a lot of time and effort. And, if you're not putting in that time, you won't find these bugs at all, let alone, from the first or second day. If you just configure a scanner to properly scan the entire application and cover the entire application, that alone could take a couple of days on its own. So I don't believe in doing pen tests in 2 or 3 days. If that's what you want, you're really just asking for a scan, a vulnerability scan.
Yeah, that's correct. So you mentioned that you coordinate with the different third parties related to the project, and then you start drafting the rules of engagement, and then you start the pen testing. Can you walk us through the methodology that you use to both maybe give an estimate to your client, the developers or the project managers, and then how you start your penetration testing? What are the different steps? And maybe give us a bit of focus on the business logic side, how you test it.
So in terms of the first question, which is dealing with the clients and estimating how much time is required for the assessment, usually there's a kickoff meeting to understand the solution. So you meet with the developers, the business owners, and so on. You have them walk through the application with you to understand how many different steps, how many different technologies are integrated together, how big the application is. And then depending on that, you could determine how much time, based on experience, obviously, how much time it would take to pen test that solution, or to do a vulnerability assessment on that solution. And when I say vulnerability assessment, I don't mean vulnerability scan. I mean manual work. So vulnerability assessment on the solution. So yeah, that's how I would determine it. How the pen test would go, that would depend on the technology that you're pen testing. So if it's application, it's different than if it's infrastructure, it's different than if it's network pen testing. So if you're in a group of people, what we usually do is we meet in order to decide on how we're going to do things. Or if you've been a while in an organization, you already know that based on the previous pen tests that you're doing. And so everyone just takes on their own tasks. But essentially with a pen test, there's the recon phase, which is you gathering as much information as you can about your target. Sometimes that can be skipped if you have that kickoff meeting and they already provide you with the documents and the build books and so on. So you don't have to try to gather that information on your own.
Sorry to interrupt you. Let's focus on a web application, for example.
Awesome. All right. So usually it's only, you don't have to do port scanning because they just give you the URLs and where the applications are running, right? So the way I would do a web app pen test is set up my intercepting proxy, which depending on what you use, it could be different. But for me, it's Burp. That's probably the most used one in the industry. So Burp Professional, I would set it up and I would have it intercept all the requests from my browser. And then I would visit every page in the application while it's intercepting the request. So what's happening in the background is, when I visit a page, let's say slash, I don't know, home, .html and then slash, sign up whatever. So every time I'm visiting a page, it gets recorded in my intercepting proxy. And the reason I do that is because if you just run like a point and click scan using Burp Professional, there are certain technologies that the spider can't crawl by itself. And so it needs help in terms of like configuration and also showing it that those pages exist and showing it the different steps that it takes in order to visit a certain page. And so I do that manually on my own. So while, I have that incentive of, making Burp understand that these pages exist, but I also have another incentive, which is really just learning how the application works from a business side that, there is like, there is a multi-step process over here. And the way the multi-step process works is, you have to click on this button. This takes you to the next step. And then you click on this button and then it takes you to the next step. So just understanding that portion, I usually take maybe a day or two, just making sure that Burp understands, where all those pages are. And then just in general for my own knowledge, how this works and making like mental notes or really physical notes if you want, on the different pages that exist, the different functionalities that exist, and how these functionalities can be exploited. Sorry, I cut you off. Were you going to say?
Yeah, awesome.
Something?
I was just asking if this would be the enumeration phase from your end. So this entire process covers the enumeration phase, right? Okay.
Exactly, that is the enumeration phase for me.
Do you scan? Do you run usually scans against JavaScript code?
What I usually do is I just make note of the different versions of technologies that are being used, and then there's an extension in Burp that can be used in order to determine if there's any vulnerabilities. Other than that, if they've written their own JavaScript code, that should definitely be tested. And usually I do that manually and not with a scanner.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right. So you have, let's say, all the data that you want. You have the URLs. You've done your enumeration phase, right? How our audience could maybe find or focus on certain parts that might give them some vulnerabilities?
So I remember when I first did my first web application, I had no idea, about anything in this field. I didn't know where to look. But the more applications you test, the more vulnerabilities you're introduced to, the more you know, which certain functionalities in the application might lead to like critical or high vulnerability. So that really depends on experience. So for example, while I'm in the enumeration phase and I see that there is, let's say, a file upload functionality, like immediately in my head, I think, oh, I need to test this to see if there's any restrictions on what I can upload. And if there are restrictions, can I bypass those restrictions? Another thing, which is like a flow thing or business logic thing, is, for example, if I see that roles are being passed as parameters in the request, I immediately think in my head in the enumeration phase, this needs to be tested to see if this is actually being validated. If it gets tampered with, does this actually get validated on the server side? If you see like a comment field, you need to test that for stored XSS. Because other clients will be able to see your comments in that application and so on. So it really depends on experience. There's no easy way of doing it. If you're a beginner, the way I would recommend is to really just pick up a a book or a course about web application pen testing and start reading from there. So the book that I recommend is the Web Application Hacker's Handbook, which is considered to be like the Bible of web app security. People say it's outdated, but really the way web applications work, I feel, is the fundamentals are still the same. It just, yes, the technologies are a little bit different right now, but the fundamentals are still the same. And I feel like that book really provides you with that. And that's how I personally learned about it. So I would read the book, I would apply it at my work, and then from there and on, you start coming across other technologies, and you just have that methodology in your head, and you start testing those technologies. You don't have to have read it in a book to know how to do it. You just, start applying the same methodology on those technologies. And then from there, you just build on that experience. And when you come across those technologies again in the future, that experience comes in handy, that you don't have to learn about it, from scratch. You've already learned about it. You know what you need to test for when it comes to those technologies. I feel like there's no easy way. There's no quick way of like, you take a course and then automatically you become an expert in web app pen testing. It really just comes by experience.
Definitely 100% with you. I remember when I first started learning about hacking and application security, I started also reading that book, Web Application Hacker Handbook. And I actually read it twice, because the first time I read it, I didn't understand anything about any. I mean, I obviously understood the basics, but it really requires you to get your hands dirty and then read it once again. And
it's an amazing book. I have I have two physical versions of the book, and I have an online version too.
Okay.
So there's I literally have it on my stand. And I've been doing web app pen testing, let's say, including my master's degree. I've been doing it for about 5 years right now, and I still have it. Every time, I come across a certain thing and I feel like I don't understand the fundamentals, I'll look at the index where, that specific technology is, and then I'll refer back to it to read on it to see if, I missed anything or there's something that I don't properly understand. So I definitely would recommend it to anyone.
Well, that's a really great tip to have it on your desk, and then whenever you feel stuck, you take the index, and then yes, thank you for that. Now you are, as a penetration tester, what got you interested in this field?
Yeah, so I have a bachelor's in mathematics and computer science. I've always been interested more in the theoretical side of computer science that relates to mathematics. So throughout my bachelor's in computer science, I didn't really take many programming courses. It was always, data structures and all those other courses that explain the mathematics, the fundamentals of computer science, which are really math. And as part of one of those courses, there was a cryptography course, and that's the really nice combination of both computer science and mathematics. And I loved that field. That was the first field in information security that I was introduced to. And I remembered at the end, close towards the end of my bachelor's degree, you had to do an honors project. And so I asked my cryptography professor, his name is Carlisle Adams. He's actually known in this field. He created one of the algorithms that competed with the advanced encryption standard, so AES. His algorithm was called CAST. But anyways,
shout out to him from here.
Yes, yeah, he's a great guy. Shout out to Professor Adams. So I asked him if he would be my supervisor for my honors project. And from there, he introduced me to something called fully homomorphic encryption, which is being able to do computations on encrypted data. And that's huge in the cloud computing industry. It wasn't theorized to be true until it was 2000 and something. I always get this wrong in interviews. It was either 2010 or 2007. Don't quote me on it. But it was a guy from IBM. So it wasn't, it was assumed to be true or theorized to be true a long time ago by one of the RSA people. But it was only proved to be true in between 2007 to 2010, I think.
I'm cryptography is really my weak spot. I know the basics through some challenges, but if you say so, it is so. So
Yeah, don't quote me on it, but yes, it was during that timeline that it was proven to be true. So I did my honors project on something called scale invariant fully homomorphic encryption over the numbers. And I found that field to be fascinating. I was set to do my master's in that area. And with that professor as well. However, I got hired as a co-op term or a work term as part of my bachelor's degree in a security company. And that security company, while I was there, hired consultants to test the applications that we were developing. And at the time, I was part of quality assurance. I was a software developer developing test suites for the applications that that organization developed. And when the security consultants came in, I was like, well, it doesn't make sense that I'm testing that the application works the way it works, but I'm not also testing that it's secure. I feel like that should be part of quality assurance. So I told my supervisor, he's like, okay, you're in charge of that. And of course they hired the consultants because I didn't know what I was doing at the time. But he was very supportive and he was like, you're in charge of that. And, that's when it dawned on me. I just, made a huge claim and I don't actually know what I'm doing. And so that's when I bought the Web Application Hackers Handbook. I would read it. I would apply it at work. And that's what got me interested in the web app field. So web app security testing field. And from there, I was introduced to web application vulnerability scanners, which I thought were those amazing tools that, all these vulnerabilities that I'm learning about in the Web Application Hackers Handbook, there's a tool that magically does that for me. So, I thought they were fascinating. And all of a sudden I was like, moving from the cryptography field more to, the web app security field. But I was also uncomfortable using them when I didn't know how they work in the backend. So I ended up doing my master's in evaluating these scanners, their limitations, how they work, and so on. And from there, I just stayed in the field. And only last year I switched to pure pen testing, regardless of technologies. So it's not just web apps anymore, but it's still my favorite field.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you completed your master's in cryptography?
No, so I ended up switching my topic. My supervisor, it was still the same supervisor, but he was nice enough to allow me to switch my topic to do it in evaluating web application vulnerability scanners.
Okay.
So it switched from cryptography to web app security. And I think that was the correct decision because I still like application security 5 years later. And it just so happens that I was doing a presentation at a B-Sides conference for the work that I did. And my supervisor at the time was in the audience. And that's how I got hired in the organization that I work at right now.
Yeah. Great to hear that. And so currently you're not just doing web application testing, you also do mobile or maybe internal pen tests? There
are many different pen tests. So there's, the external ones where, you come at the organization from an external perspective. You're not given anything about the organization except maybe the name of the organization. And then from there, you need to try to determine the possible technologies that they're using at that organization and how you could abuse that once you land in the organization. So it has a phishing component and so on, or maybe dropping USBs in order to gain access to that organization. There's internal pen tests where you already have a foothold within the network. And then from there, you need to try to gain access to that technology or that environment that you're pen testing. There is, the classic web app pen tests that I've been involved in for a while right now. There's mobile pen tests if your organization makes use of that. And so on. There's a ton of different pen tests. I've been fortunate to be involved in quite a few different types, not all of them. But hopefully in the future, I hope to be involved in all of them.
That's a really huge area. Even pentesting itself is a huge area. So you still need to specialize in some area or another. I don't think it's sufficient to be good at all the things, because you need time and effort, and it's not something that is guaranteed to be reached. But once you gain a general overview of the cybersecurity field, then you can specialize into some parts that interest you. For example, currently I'm interested in red team engagements. And so that's what I'm trying to learn and develop my skills in. And once you find the things that interest you, then it doesn't feel like you're working. It's more of like you're doing what you like.
Absolutely. We're very fortunate that we're in a field where the thing you do is not only fun for you, but like it keeps you entertained. There's always something new to learn. And I think you brought up a great point. I'm always weary of like people who say they're experts at red teaming, they're experts at, they're expert purple teamers, they're experts at detection, they're experts at like pen testing and so on. And then you look at the amount of experience that they have, and it's like maybe they've been in the industry for like 6 years. And I think about it and I'm like, red teaming alone is such a huge field. Like there are, like I know consultants who would just specialize in specific areas of red teaming, let alone the whole field of red teaming. So, it's when people present themselves to you as experts in the field, I'm always like, it takes a lot of time and effort just to become an expert in a specific like technology or in a specific way of doing things, let alone in this whole entire field of like, cybersecurity or even pen testing alone or red teaming alone. So yeah, that's a great point, because it's always daunting for people who are new to this field, seeing, all these experts in this field. But reality, when you come to it, what I would recommend is, yes, get a general overview of the fundamentals of everything. But then depending on what you feel is entertaining to you and what is fun for you and what you want to learn about, that's what you should specialize in. And that doesn't have to be like today it's web apps for me. Tomorrow it might switch to network pen testing. It might switch to something else. So it really depends on the individual person, but you should definitely specialize, because that's what's going to differentiate you from other pen testers.
Yeah, sure. And also always I like to keep in mind this being humble is I mean, you can't learn everything. You obviously you can be an expert, but always having this humble attitude allows you to keep learning, because there's always something new to learn.
Absolutely. Yep.
I have a question regarding your course that it's about web application testing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've
Yes.
gone through it. I saw that it's based on the Portswigger Academy content, right? So
Mm-hmm.
can you walk us through the things that you provide in this course?
Yeah. So remember at the beginning of this conversation, I mentioned the Web Application Hackers Handbook and how I always refer to it. A few years ago, it's probably been 2 years right now, I started studying for the OSWE, so the Offensive Security Web Expert certification. So that's mainly you could think of it as a white box pen test where you're given the code, and then from there you're supposed to find the vulnerabilities. It's supposed to be an intermediate or an advanced certification, and so it doesn't really go into the nitty gritty details of the vulnerabilities versus how to find the vulnerabilities in the code. And so while I was doing that certification at the time, I already have experience in web app pen testing. And so I was comfortable with reading the code, and I already knew about those vulnerabilities. But I realized a lot of people would enroll in that certification, hoping that they would learn how to test web applications. However, what they're really getting is, the knowledge of how to read code in order to find vulnerabilities in the code, which is a whole, I feel, other field on its own. And so this is where I would refer people to the Web Application Hackers Handbook. But then I decided to see if there's something that is updated, something that covers technologies that, you see in web applications today. And so I stumbled across, the same people that wrote the Web Application Hackers Handbook had created an academy. And this academy was online. It was available for free. And it was constantly updated. So unlike a book, you don't have to go through rewriting the whole thing and then approval and then publishing it and so on. They could just add labs, and they have labs that contain technologies, modern technologies. And so I started solving those for my own benefit, just to become a better web app pen tester. And I realized that there's only one thing that is missing in those labs. There's no kind of what do you call it? So there are written solutions, but there's no videos of people explaining in depth how to solve those solutions, as opposed to, a step-by-step, following a step-by-step written solution. And so that's when, I was like, if I was a beginner in this field, I would want a video to watch about this, right? Versus, just seeing, do this step, and so on. So I started creating those videos, both to make sure that I properly understand how the vulnerabilities are and that I know how to explain them, but also to benefit other people. And because I just genuinely believe in that platform, just like I believed in and still do in the book itself. Right, in helping other people. And I chose it specifically because it's online, it's free, and it's done by experts, right? It's not just done by random people who have, a few years of experience in this field. It's actually done by people who have like 20 years of experience in this field, are top of their industry. And so I started, and I'll differentiate that in a bit. So I started creating YouTube videos about that, because I do believe that, just like the platform is free, the YouTube videos should be free as well and available for everyone. And so my videos are posted on YouTube. A while ago, I think a few months ago, if it wasn't the beginning of last year, I created a course. Now the course is the same exact thing as the YouTube videos. It's just there in case you're interested in supporting me, or you're interested in seeing videos that don't have ads in them, like YouTube ads, or you're interested in gaining access to a Discord channel where you can ask questions. So I used to answer all the questions on my YouTube platform, on Twitter, on my email, and so on. But I have a full-time job. I also create videos weekly, and plus, other personal life. So I was no longer able to maintain all those questions. And so if you have any questions, you could enroll in the course itself. You get added to the Discord channel, and then it's a community effort between myself and other people in the course. So really the course is the same as the YouTube channel. It just provides extra perks, because I do believe that just like the platform is free and available for everyone, the YouTube videos should also be free. And yeah, it's pretty much just explains different vulnerabilities and how to exploit them. And the way you exploit them could go from like a beginner perspective all the way to like a really advanced or like expert perspective, depending on the topic. And I really like that platform because it goes into depth. So like the SQL injection module, my videos are like over 8 hours just to describe how SQL injection works. And so, yeah, if you're interested in learning about web app security and becoming specialized in that area, I would recommend checking out those videos.
Yeah, I appreciate your honesty. And I remember back when I was barely starting, like learning web application hacking, when I started reading the book, I actually purchased their lab, which was really old, and it contained the challenges, but not the solutions. And I was always stuck because I couldn't solve them. I was frustrated. So fast forward, nowadays there's a lot of content, including the Portswigger Academy. I started solving some challenges. It's really good to have someone to walk you through the mindset of a hacker, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I really like try to focus on. And I think that's what, when people comment on my videos, that's what they really like about it, is the fact that, I don't just like say, oh, we're using, so and so command to do it. No, we build that command together. And then that explanation of why each portion of the command is included is there. And just that exact methodology of like, I start with like, fuzzing the application. And then from there, once you get an error, you try to learn more about the error. You fuzz it a little bit more until you can build that, let's say, query in order to exploit the vulnerability. And I think people really appreciate that methodology. I didn't have it when I was learning about web apps. And you mentioned at the book during my time, the labs were already discontinued for the book.
Oh. Okay.
So I couldn't even practice using the labs. I would download something like WebGoat or, all those different applications that are available for free through like the OWASP platform. But then when I found this platform, I was like, I personally, before you enroll in any certification, or anything else, I would recommend you finish all the Portswigger labs. Once you're done with that, maybe you could look for more advanced certifications like the OSWE. But before that, I think that gives you a pretty good intermediate knowledge in how to do web app pen tests.
Yeah, and basically there's a huge difference between black box, gray box, and white box testing. You've seen cryptography, you've seen different types of penetration tests. What area of information security interests you currently?
Mm-hmm. So far the one I like the most is web app pen testing. It's just the more I get introduced to different areas, the more I realize I picked right for myself from the beginning. And the reason is because like with network or infrastructure, unless you're doing core research, the work becomes repetitive. Whereas for web apps, like every web application that I've been given is like completely different. And so it feels like you're starting from scratch every time. Yes, you start to, think, oh, I saw JOTs. I should, test for JOTs related vulnerabilities. But like the way the applications are built, the logic behind the applications is different because there's a human aspect to it. The developers, different developers code differently. They include different defenses that could potentially be bypassed and so on. And so far for me, it's been web app pen testing, but I'm trying to not keep myself in this like closed box of like doing web app pen tests my whole life. And that's why I switched to a pure pen test position last year. And I'm trying to get better at like infrastructure pen testing and network pen testing. And I started the CRTO cert a while ago because I'm also interested in red teaming. But so far, web app is my favorite.
Good. Yeah. For me, I did penetration testing, especially for web and mobile. But because I was testing pretty much the same technologies, I got bored. And at the same time, I wanted to change to something much broader than web. So the question I asked myself was, okay, so what is the tactics that real threat groups try to follow in order to compromise a system or a company or a set of companies, a goal in general? And when I looked, I became aware that it's much broader than web applications. And so why I chose offensive security in the first place was to be like those hackers in an ethical way. So it made more sense for me to get interested in red teaming.
Yeah. So like if you look at like the MITRE ATT&CK framework and like all the different techniques that attackers use, it's just like there is so much. And like even switching to kind of a like the blue team, which is, where you're in like detection engineering, where you actually understand exactly how these attacks works, and how to develop detections for those attacks is a whole other field that I plan on exploring in the future. So there's a lot to learn in the cybersecurity field. You'll never get bored. As long as you don't burn yourself out, you'll never get bored.
Yeah. So for people who are hearing here, if you really like the challenge, if you really like to get up in the morning and start learning something new, if you like to step outside your comfort zone, then the security field or information security field is really the field for you.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. In your part-time, do you do some bug bounty hunting?
No. So part-time, I do YouTube and content creation. I also do consulting. So it depends on how much free time I have. For me, it was always like there were opportunities for me to work in my free time. So I never gravitated towards the bug bounty field where you have to find a bug in order to get paid. Okay. And so maybe if someone had introduced me to it back when I was younger, that's something that I would have done. It's something that I would recommend to everyone that is new. But I've been fortunate enough that I've reached a position in my career where, there's just way too much work to be done. And if I wanted work to do during my free time, if someone will pay me hourly versus, per bug that you find. Although there are some people that are really rich off of bug bounty, right? So it depends on the person. But for me personally, I would do consulting in my free time if I had it.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Bug bounty is not really something like a contract, so you can hack whenever you want or don't hack at all. But there's also this part where your income is not guaranteed. And so when you do the effort, it depends really on your experience and your luck as well.
Exactly, yeah. I always recommend it to beginners, and then depending on how it works out for them, they might do it as a full-time job, right? As experienced individuals. But the reason I recommend it to beginners is because that's a realistic environment for you to test in, and you're not going to be, it's legal, right? You're not going to be reprimanded for it, right? Yeah. And you might find bugs, right? And you might get paid for your bugs. And, if you have a profile where, you found so many bugs that could be helpful in job interviews and so on. And then if you're really good at it, and you really know how, how to escalate bugs and how to, split them in such a way that you could maximize your income, and then this becomes like a full-time job, then go for it. I see people that this is their full-time job and they make a lot out of it, but then there's others that don't and prefer to be paid on an hourly rate. And I've never done bug bounty, so I naturally just gravitated to the other option.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you want to give like someone, I get this question a lot, by the way. Someone comes to me and say, "Hey, I want to start in hacking. What do you recommend me to do as practical steps?"
Yeah. So is this web app hacking?
Well,
that they want to get interested in, or something else?
he doesn't, or she doesn't know. Just came to you and say, "I want to be a hacker. How I want to be like you. How can I become that?"
All right. I get this question a lot as well, on my YouTube comments and through Twitter as well. I think regardless of what type of hacker you want to be, you need to understand the fundamentals. And so if you don't understand them, this will come and bite you in the back in the future. And then as an experienced individual who doesn't know the fundamentals, you're more reluctant to ask those questions to other people, and then it just builds on that, and you don't want to go through that path at all. So what I would recommend is learning the fundamentals, And that includes, like, for example, networking, fundamentals. I would recommend also programming fundamentals as well, and so on. After you've learned the fundamentals, if
So
you're interested,
I'm just gonna stop
yes,
you just right at the fundamental part. Do you have any references, like something that I can maybe just Google or buy and then start learning right away?
So the way I've learned them is just through Googling. So I get this question a lot when it comes to like learning Python. Unfortunately, I didn't learn it through school or through like a specific course. I just needed to write something up, and so I would Google it, and I would build my knowledge, the more I used Python. And so I never learned a course, and that's why I don't personally recommend any courses. There's a lot out there. Do your research, right? That's what I would, recommend to someone who's asking. Do your research, read the reviews on those courses. If you're the type of person that prefers structured learning, there's a lot of courses out there. So do your research, read the reviews on the course, and then just purchase that course if you have the means to, and go for it. Start learning with that. So when it comes to the fundamentals, for me, it was like a bit unorthodox. I never gained the fundamentals through school or through a specific course, because, most of my education was really mathematics. So I had to learn them on my own. However, when it comes to pen testing or as a whole, or web application pen testing, I do have solid recommendations.
Give them to us.
Okay, awesome. So for pen testing, what I would recommend is there's a few certifications and courses that I personally would recommend, and it's the route that I would go through if I was just starting out. For pen testing, the first thing that I would do is enroll in the Cyber Mentors or Heath Adams course. I think it was called Ethical Hacking for Beginners.
Practical ethical hacker.
Practical ethical hacking or practical ethical hacker.
Actually, he just, I guess, published it free of charge in YouTube, which is really awesome. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So what you could do is just literally gain that information for free. And in that course, he goes through all the different steps in pen testing. So you gain a lot of the fundamentals there as well. And you get introduced to quite a few different phases in a pen test, and the different technologies that you're going to come across. And of course, like, it's a 20-hour course or a little bit more. Yeah. That's not going to teach you everything, right? But it'll tell you like the technologies and the different concepts that you have to learn about. And once you identify those, because you're a beginner, you won't be able to identify it on your own, but through that course, you're able to identify those, and then you could read up on those technologies on your own. Now, there's no course that will provide you with that. I would recommend literally Googling it, because that's going to be your life as an information security professional. Googling stuff. So I would recommend Googling it. So for example, AD, I wouldn't Google AD attacks. I would Google, how does AD work, right? So how does Active Directory work? I would build my own AD lab. And then from there, after I've learned exactly how it's supposed to function and like a legitimate use case, then I would learn about the attacks. Once you're done with those, if you want to go for the PMPT cert that he has, go for it. If you don't, what I would recommend is the OSCP. So I've personally done that cert. I think it's useful. I think it opens up a lot of opportunities for you in terms of the job market. And so I would definitely recommend it if you have the means to do it. If you don't, I would recommend getting as much knowledge as you can on your own, and then getting a job through, that knowledge that you requested, and then getting your job to pay.
And maybe to have a solid CV compared to your peers. I can re-say the same thing that you said before, which is enroll in solving hands-on challenges on the well-known platforms, Hack the Box or Try Hack Me or rootme.org. They are
absolutely.
I didn't have such resources when I started, and I'm really thankful that I started learning on rootme.org. It's a fantastic platform which is free, and you get tons of challenges in different areas, from networking to server to client to also CTF. And then once you have this great CV, you build up your confidence, then yeah, you can apply for jobs and hopefully you should be accepted.
Yeah, and then from there, like based on like the people you work with and the technologies that you're gonna come across in that job, that path becomes clear on like other certifications to take or other things to learn. But you brought up a really good point about like Hack the Box. And try Hack Me. So the Cyber Mentors course uses Hack the Box, or at least has a version of it. I think right now that uses it. I haven't been keeping up.
Not sure, but I purchased the first version. I just focused on certain areas.
The version that I purchased, it did use Hack the Box and it had a capstone project, but I remember him tweeting about it saying that it will no longer be dependent on Hack the Box and they'll have their own labs. I don't know if that has been implemented yet or not, but like all these platforms, like it's like $20 a month or $10 a month, or something like that. So they're really cheap. And your persistence on learning on those platforms is really what's going to differentiate you from other people in the interview process. Because like going through a certification where you read a book and you learn how to apply the things in a book and so on, and then you do the exam, that's really different from you learning on your own through multiple platforms, banging your head on the wall like let's say 10 times a day to learn something. And so it really differentiates you, and it's a path that I would go through. I wouldn't go to the OSCP right away. It's a great cert and I would recommend it, but I wouldn't go for it right away. I would first start with like those courses that the Cyber Mentor has, those platforms that you just mentioned, and then from there do the OSCP, and then whatever area you decide to specialize in, you might want to do other certifications. So that's for pen testing. Do you have anything else to add before I talk about web app?
No, go ahead.
No? Okay. So web app pen testing is like a whole other field. Yes, you might come across web apps when you're pen testing. Actually, you will come across web apps when you're pen testing, but usually if you're not an experienced web app pen tester, you don't do a full security assessment on that web app. You just see if there's like default credentials, and if you can use default credentials, how to use that app in order to achieve your end goal. But you don't actually do a full security assessment on the web app. That's what you do for web app pen tests. And if you're a beginner and you want to get into that field, again, I wouldn't recommend any courses or anything like that. What I would recommend is buying the Web Application Hacker's Handbook, starting to read it, and then depending on the chapter that you're reading, solve the exercises in the Web Security Academy that they have. And if you do that for all the Web Security Academy courses and you've got like that book memorized, or like you understand everything in that book, I would say you're at an intermediate level. And then if you want to improve your skills even more and understand it from like a white box perspective, I would recommend going to the OSWE. But again, wouldn't recommend that certification route before actually gaining that fundamental knowledge through the free or almost free resources that are available out there.
Yeah. That's a really great roadmap for penetration testing and also web application pen test. I would also add that you could get certified in Burp practitioner. So once you go through the entire course, the entire content with their hands-on, I believe that it should be fairly easy to just get certified and add this to your CV. That would give you a boost as well. Obviously, if I'm a recruiter, I've done recruitment before, I don't rely solely on certifications. But if I sense that this candidate has some kind of critical thinking and they are flexible in learning new things, what is going to make a difference is those certifications. So if two people are on the same level, then if someone has certifications and other one not, then I would naturally choose the one with the certifications.
Yeah, because they spend a lot of their personal time getting those certifications and always updating their skills. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if they paid it from their pocket, that would be
From their
even
pocket, yeah.
It
Then they're
proves,
motivated too.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
I remember I've done the OSCP in 2017, and I paid it from my pocket just because I really love penetration testing. We don't have much time left, but I'm just going to give some gratitude to people or mentors that you really appreciated working with them, or that gave you how to get started or helped you in any way during your information security career. Do you want to give them a shout out from here?
Yeah, so I always say in this field, you're standing on the shoulders of giants. So whether these are people that you know or people that have helped you without you knowing. So things like, watching videos of people that spent a lot of time working on that content, or reading blogs, or even simple things as just Googling on Stack Overflow, and someone had taken the time to, write up a full article on answering that question. You don't have to do that research on your own. So there were, I believe there were a lot of people that helped me reach where I am today. A lot of them are not in the public eye, and so I won't name them personally. They know who they are. But there are a few that, someone who's watching this might recognize. One is my supervisor, obviously, Carlisle Adams, who supported me throughout my master's, throughout my bachelor's degree, and got me initially interested in cybersecurity. Second person would be Tanya Janka. We used to live in the same city back then, and I remember the first thing that I did when I started my master's degree is I decided to attend a local OWASP Ottawa chapter. And at the time, for the first time at that chapter, they were doing mentorship, and she was offering to be a mentor to someone. And I was like, hey, can you be my mentor? I'm new to this field. And she said yes, and she supported me throughout my career since then. There is Nancy. She maintains she's one of the chairs for the OWASP DevSlop chapter. Again, she's always pushed me to go further in my career. Never, in a way of forcing me to do something, but always suggesting things that, I wouldn't have done myself. And just supporting me throughout those things. And then last but not least, someone that I've never met or really communicated with, IPSec. I remember when I was studying for my OSCP, I would religiously watch those Hack the Box videos that he creates. I think he was probably, at the time, there was no the Cyber Mentor course, by the way. It came out right before I was going to do the exam. So I didn't have, that course to teach me all the fundamentals. So I would watch his videos with a couple of friends, and then rewatch it on my own, and then rewatch it again and make notes. And just learning his methodology is what got me to where I am in terms of the pen testing field. And that goes back to where I say, you're standing on the shoulders of giants, people who sacrifice their personal time to teach you this knowledge for free. And so huge shout out to IPSec as well. And I think those are the people that are in the public eye. I'm sure there's others that I've forgotten, but yeah.
I always like to give thanks to people because, as you said, you can't get where you are without the help of others. And so that's really important to introduce in any session.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking me that question, by the way. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to mention those people.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, I think that wraps it up. I've gone through all my questions. I guess that marks the end of this session. But if you have for somehow any question, feel free to ask them. Otherwise, I propose that we end the call.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you very much for accepting the invitation, and let's keep in touch.
Sounds good.
Bye-bye.